Hey guys, my storytelling is not the best, so I probably shouldn't post this. But I have wanted to tell this story for a while now, so here we go. First, a bit of backstory. This creepy encounter happened about a year ago. I had just turned 18 and was 5'3", but looked much younger than I was. I had just moved out of my parents' home that year and started flatting with some close friends. For reference, I live in a small town in New Zealand, where there is almost no crime, and when it does occur, it's almost always something small, like burglary or something like that. So I felt pretty safe at the time. Anyways, back to the story. One afternoon, I was at my flat with my 3 flatmates, when they said they were going to go pick up a couple of our friends and come straight back. So I decided to stay home since there wasn't enough room in the car. Fast forward about an hour, and they still hadn't come back. So I checked their snap maps and saw that they had driven to a bigger city about an hour away and hadn't told me. Naturally, I was upset and confused about why they had left me, so I tried to message them and got no reply. At that point, I was upset about being ditched and decided I would go for a long walk. So I started walking and decided to walk to my grandma's, who lives about 5 kilometers out of town, with my sister. By the time I got there, it was about 5 p.m. I took a nap until my sister woke me up at about midnight and asked if I wanted a ride home since she was going to bed. I checked my flatmates' locations and could see that they were on their way home, but I didn't want to go to the house by myself. So I texted one of my friends, Tyler, and asked if I could come over until they got back. He said I could. Once I got to Tyler's, we just chilled for a bit until his mom said I had to leave, so I tried to call my friends to pick me up. They didn't answer. By now, it was 1 in the morning. Tyler said he would walk me home, so we started walking the 5 blocks to my house. After we were about 3 blocks away, I got a call from my flatmate, Chelsea. She said they were back in town and could pick me up in 5 minutes after dropping someone off. I told her it was okay and that I was almost home. I know this was stupid, but I thought I was safe. I had lived in that town my whole life, and nothing like this had ever happened to me or anyone I knew. So I told Tyler that he could go home and that I would be okay to walk the rest of the way by myself. He asked if I was sure, and I said yes. So we turned back and we went our separate ways. I put my earplugs in and pulled my hood up so nobody could see I was a girl walking alone at night. I was just about to play my music when I heard a car coming up the road behind me. I pulled my hood closer around my face and prayed they would keep driving past. To my dismay, the car slowed down almost to a stop directly beside me, and the car window rolled down to reveal a 25 to 30-year-old man staring at me. The car windows were tinted, so I couldn't see if there was anyone else in the car. I kept walking, hoping he would leave, but he just drove along beside me and called out to me. "Hey, girl, what are you doing out at this time?" "Going for a walk," I replied, still walking. "Do you want a ride?" he asked. "No thank you," I said, and sped up my walk. I expected him to drive away, but he just sped up his car to match my speed. "Come on, get in the car. I'll give you a ride home," he insisted. I took a good look at him. There was something about him that gave me the creeps. At this point, I was getting a bit scared. "No, my house is just up here. It's fine," I replied, pointing up the street. It wasn't, but I didn't want him to know I was at least 2 blocks from my house. After that, I put in my earplugs and ignored him. Finally, I heard the car drive away. I breathed a sigh of relief. It's fine, I'm just being paranoid. He was just trying to make sure I got home safe, I tried to reassure myself. I watched as the car drove around the next corner. I got to the intersection that the car had just gone around and started to cross it. I glanced down the road to see where the car had gone. The street was empty. That's weird, I thought, since the car had just gone around that corner. That's when I saw it, a car parked in a driveway about 2 houses down. I couldn't see what it looked like. There were other cars parked on the street and in other driveways, but I just got the worst feeling in my gut, and I knew that it was the same car. I walked across the road, and just as I was walking out of sight, I glanced back. To my horror, the car had turned on its headlights and was backing out onto the street. I could see it clearly now. It was the same car. Crap, 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 was all that was going through my head. I needed to do something. I pulled out my phone and it was on 1%. I rang Chelsea, praying that she would answer and that my phone didn't die. She answered. "There's a guy in a car following me," I frantically said, while checking behind me to see that the car had turned the corner and was slowly gaining on me. At this point, I was preparing myself to either scream bloody murder, bang on someone's door for help, or fight for my life in case someone got out of the car. "What? Where are you?" Chelsea screamed into the phone. She sounded more panicked than me. I don't know, I don't remember the street name," I said. At this point, the car was rolling to a stop beside me. All the windows were up, and I couldn't see inside. Right at that moment, I saw a car coming through the intersection just ahead. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Chelsea and my other friend David. "I see you," I heard Chelsea yell into the phone, just as my phone went flat. They did a U-turn and pulled up ahead of me. I sprinted over and jumped into the car. I was shaking uncontrollably and could barely speak. We drove away, and I looked back to see the car do a U-turn and speed off in the other direction. Later, Chelsea told me that they had no idea where I was, and they just happened to drive down that street when they did. About a month later, I told my parents what happened. They said that I was probably overreacting, and that he probably was making sure that I got home okay. That may well have been the case, but I've always had this feeling that that man, or men, if there were more in the car, had bad intentions. I can't help but wonder what would have happened if my phone had died earlier, or if Chelsea and David hadn't happened to drive through that intersection when they did.
Alright, so check this out. This is very long, and I apologize in advance. Several years ago, on Halloween night, and I already know, that's stereotypical, I was followed home by a stranger. I worked at a large mall about an hour away from home. The store closed at 10 p.m., and the only bus home ran every hour. It only dropped me off 2/3 of the way home, and I would have to walk the rest of the way. This usually happened between 11 and 1 at night, depending on if I could get the store closed down in time and if the bus wasn't too packed for me to get on. I'm not a small woman. I'm fairly tall, I'm fairly round, and not particularly attractive either. My uniform was just a polo shirt and black trousers, flat shoes, all covered with a thick coat. I didn't see him get on the bus. To be fair, the bus was packed and noisy and the walkways were crowded, and I did my best to just block it all out with my headphones and staring out the window. I'm not a people person, and having been at work for 12 hours on a busy day, surrounded by these same jerks, I was just pissed off and desperate to get off the bus and be alone. When we finally got to my stop and I managed to struggle my way to the front of the bus through people that refused to move, I stumbled into the night air and breathed a sigh of relief. A couple of people got off the bus behind me, and I started up the hill, crossing the road to continue up the side street that led to my road. This side street is very long and has offshoots into residential streets on very steep hills going down. The street itself is lined with small shops, and there's a high, grassy bank on the opposite side that has houses along the top, so it feels very isolated after the shops close. Very few people get off at my bus stop this time of night, and even fewer head in the same direction as me. Those that do cut off and go down one of these hills long before I get to the hill that leads up to my building. Now, the street isn't very well lit. The street lamps are few and far between. Several of them are motion activated, so they don't even turn on until you're right on top of them. I've walked home in the dark this way 1,000 times, and I've walked to work this way at 3 or 4 in the morning 1,000 times as well, for a different job. While I always enjoy the cool night air, and I'm not afraid of the dark and love how bright the stars are where I live, I don't loiter. I walk fast so I can get home and shower ASAP. This night, I noticed someone walking behind me. I usually do because, like I stated above, very few people walk this way this time of night. I was aware of him and waited for him to turn down one of the side streets, but he didn't. It felt a little weird, but I'm not the only person that lives in this area, so maybe he just isn't regularly walking this way this time of night, so I've just never seen him before. I get to the medical surgery and car park at the bottom of my hill and cut across it as always. At this point, I know if he also heads up my hill, I need to worry a little bit more. This hill goes alongside the surgery, and then there are high walls on my side of the street that block off the flats and the other side from my road. They can only be accessed from the road before mine. At the top of the hill, this wall ends and turns into an alley that runs parallel to my building. The opposite side of the road has multiple closed pubs, a closed corner store, and an old church that's been converted into a Muslim worship center, which is also closed. There are even less street lamps here, and my building is surrounded by a metal fence with 20 or so feet of grass that slopes down to the entrance of the building where the doorway is lit up. The point is, it's isolated, and the only reason someone should be up here this time of night is if they live in my building. This guy crosses the car park after me, and now I'm feeling concerned. I know he doesn't live in my building. There are 9 flats, over 3 floors, and 10 people. I know all of them, and they all know me. We would recognize each other even in this level of darkness. So I walk faster up the hill, hoping to get in the building before he catches up. He starts walking faster too. I can hear him gaining on me, and by the time I get to the gate, I know he's too close to me for me to be able to open the door and get inside before he's on me. The building is dark, and I know everyone is in bed, and it makes me feel all alone at this point. I'm terrified. So, thinking quickly, I cross the road and walk further up the hill behind parked cars. I use the opportunity to swing my backpack off of one shoulder and grab my keys. I wait for him to follow me and get behind the cars too, so it'll take just a little longer for him to be able to cross back over before I bolt across the road, throwing open the gate. I swing it hard behind me because he's now running at me, and I think it'll either latch before he can catch it or it'll hit him. Either way, it'll buy me a few seconds. I slide down the slope, barely staying on my feet because it's dangerously slippery when it's wet. I turn the corner at the bottom and slam my keycard on the reader, pressing hard on the heavy door before it beeps so it'll open that much faster. The door is heavy and on a fire safety hinge that means it can't slam or force it closed. The stairs are a couple of steps into the building and to the left. I live on the top floor. It's not a big building, 3 flats on each floor, 2 flights of stairs. It's also a concrete stairwell, so every little sound echoes and can be heard behind closed doors. I get inside the building and immediately I bolt up the stairs. I'm only a few steps up when the door flies open behind me and this guy comes after me. Feeling a little more secure now that I'm in my building and only feet away from my neighbors, I spin around before he reaches me and I slam my heavy backpack into him. He falls back to the landing and manages to catch himself by grabbing hold of the handrail. I scream at him and I tell him to get away from me at the top of my lungs, and I hold my bag out in front of me. Now we're inside and the stairwell is lit by the motion-activated lights, and I get my first proper look at him. He's a little taller than me. I'm 5'8", he's black and old enough to be graying. His clothes are weird, all made out of that weird waxy material some weatherproof jackets are, and he's wearing heavy boots. I don't recognize him at all, and he looks up at me with wide eyes as I stare down at him. I'm fully prepared to kick him in the face and throw my bag if I have to. I don't want him to be able to follow me into my flat, so I stare him down. He begins to stutter, hands ringing over the handrail and ducking his head a little, trying to look pathetic and harmless. He mutters something about visiting his son. Like I stated before, 9 people other than me live in this building. At the time, none of them were black, and none of them other than myself were young enough for him to be their parent. Even if his son did live here, how would he know to follow me off the bus to get to my building? Why did he follow me when I moved away from my building? And why did he chase me? He could have walked into the building and buzzed up to his son for him to let him in if it was true. I begin shouting at him to get out, repeating those 2 words over and over again, sprinkling in, "I don't know you, and you don't live here." He continues muttering, making his excuses, but I shout over him. When I hear neighbors moving around and coming towards their doors, probably to look through their peepholes, I begin to back up the stairs. My neighbor, right at the bottom of the stairs, behind the man, opens the door, leaving her chain on and peering through at us. She asks me if I'm okay and if she needs to call the police. The guy spins around to stare at her, his hands out in a stop motion. And I hear another neighbor open his door behind the stairs, also on the ground floor. He calls out to ask if everything is okay too, and I just yell out to both of them, "He followed me home, I don't know him, he won't leave." I'm now at the top of the first set of stairs, still looking down at him. My male neighbor starts telling him to get out, either more intimidated by the man than he was me, or realizing he was outnumbered, he begins trying to open the front door. You have to press a button to get it open, and he clearly doesn't know this. Further evidence, he's never been here before. Feeling more secure now that I'm not alone and he's trying to leave, I bolt across the landing up to the final flight of stairs and get to my door before I lock it behind me. I was dripping with sweat and very close to a panic attack. I dragged my Hoover to the front door and propped it up. Just in case someone tried to open my door, I would hear the Hoover fall. I didn't sleep very well at all, listening to every sound in the building, and luckily I didn't have work the next day. I did finally wake up at about 6 a.m. to a lot of sound in the building's landings. I could hear people opening every bin chute room and coming back out again. I peered through my peephole to see uniformed policemen searching the common areas of the building. I didn't call the police, but I assume one of the neighbors downstairs did. The bin rooms are fairly large, so I imagine they were checking to see if someone was hiding. I don't know for sure, and I didn't ask. Other than asking me if I was okay when we saw each other next, the neighbors that helped on that night never said anything else about it. I don't know who he was or what he wanted. I've never seen him again, and I stopped working at that shopping center a couple of years later. I do feel guilty for not calling the police, just in case he had done this before or since and the woman didn't manage to get away. But at the time, I just wanted to forget about it and move forward.
Because of specific circumstances and that it happened a year ago, I'll still omit certain specifics regarding my whereabouts. I was making a long trip with a sibling and his friend through Mexico. We were visiting a few cities on a holiday. The plan was to take the safe route the whole time and only take the recommended highways to avoid any encounters with possible drug lords, henchmen, or hitmen. One special part was a mountain range famous for having over 3,000 curves within it. We wanted to avoid it at all costs, so we prepared super early to travel with full daylight and get through the easy, straightforward path instead of the mountain range. Problems began when my sibling's friend began getting constant stomach aches. Nothing he ate sat good with him, and we lost about 4 hours just tending to his needs. By the time we reached the point where you needed to either get into the mountain range or go through the straight path, there was a massive car wreckage on the straight path, and it was barred from access. My sibling decided to go through the mountain range, despite the fact that it was getting dark and that it was raining and foggy. 1 hour inside the mountain, and we arrived to a small settlement where we stopped for gas. Fog made visibility nearly zero, rain was constant, the curves were sharp and dangerous, and the golden rule is to never travel at night on Mexican highways. Inside the small settlement, a man on a bike approached us by the window and asked us, "Hey, we're about to get into the Sierra. Want to come along? There's 3 of us who want to go through, and it'll be safer." The guy looked like a stereotypical thug. For someone driving through a mountain range, using a bike was exceedingly stupid due to the harsh weather conditions. My sibling said, "Sure, let's go," thinking of the goodwill of those people. Once he left, my sibling's friend noticed him giving some strange signals to the others, and one of them getting something out of a trunk. He told my brother to hit the gas ASAP and to get into the dangerous mountain range as soon as possible, because they were more than likely car hijackers working as henchmen for the local drug lords. What was especially concerning was the fact that my car was brand new and was desirable for criminal activities. My brother hit the gas and got into the range, and we saw the men getting desperately into their cars and bikes to follow us. However, my sibling is an expert driver and also extremely reckless, So we disregarded the danger and got into an almost zero visibility mountain range with rain at 70 miles per hour with tight curves that appeared out of nowhere. We drove inside the fog for nearly half an hour, and then we continued driving on an extremely stressful situation because we didn't know if they were still chasing us. After 4 hours, we reached our destination, unscathed but mentally depleted. That night, as I cried on my bed, I browsed for local incidents regarding murders or cars being stolen. Turns out, that settlement was a criminal den where police often turned a blind eye, and people were simply taken out of their cars, then thrown off the cliffs to the bottom, never to be found. The only people who ever tried to calm down the area was the army, and they hadn't been there in months. Never again will I drive through Mexico. Never, ever again. What's up, everybody? This is the Lone Wolf here. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed these 3 stories. I want to give a big thank you to the Redditors who allowed me to read their stories in this video. There will of course be links to their posts in the description below for anybody who wants to read them. I also want to give a very special thank you to my guest for this video, Darek Weber Scary Stories. He's an awesome horror narrator, and I'm very glad that I got to work with him. There will be a link to his channel in the description below, as well as an icon that will appear on screen at the end of this closing. So everybody be sure to check him out and show him some support. Anyways, if you're new to my channel, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing if you like the narrations. Hit the bell for notifications and join the Lone Wolf Pack. If any of you guys want to send me a message or maybe a personal scary story that you would like to hear on my channel, there will be a link to my email account and my Twitter account in the description. There will also be links in the description for all of the music artists that I used in this video, along with each individual track that I used for those of you interested in the music. And last but certainly not least, if any of you guys have any ideas or tips for me to make my channel even better, please leave me a comment or send me a personal message. Until next time, stay spooky. And remember, the hunt begins when the moon is full. Sweet dreams.